but thinking of our biblical perspective, there's some truth in this. How do we respond when people change in our lives? Do we respond along with them in a really good way? Or do we butt up against that nature because we're used to, even though we just said like we want something different, but we're used to what we're used to, and we are afraid of anything looking any different than it does, even if we claim that we don't like it. Hey everyone, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter. I'm bringing you the Bible in 365 days, and I am doing this every day using the chronological Bible reading plan from oneyearbibleonline.com. And really big housekeeping. It's not big. Let me take that back. So I got a new phone. And with my new phone, my mic doesn't work. And so today I'm using these AirPods, so headphones, and all I can hear is my own voice. And so I apologize if something gets funky or whatever. You're not going to get a lot of the sounds of nature out here because most of it will be cut out because of the AirPods. But you'll probably have more clarity in my voice. So anyway, today is a day, and if you're brand new, you're going to be like, wow, this is so clear. Amazing. So today is day 281. This is from our reading plan from oneyearbibleonline.com, and it is October 7th. Our reading today is Mark 5, Matthew 8:28 through 9:26, and Luke 8:26 through 56. Essentially, we have three stories today. So three of Jesus's miraculous healings. And so, but each of them has a little more detail than some of the things that we've seen before. So before I get started, I'm going to go into the 2-minute history. And obviously, if you've been here before, you know the drill. Fast forward for 2 minutes. If you have not been here before, I want you to get a little bit of a taste of what it is that we're doing and where we are at. So the Old Testament was started to be written by Moses. So those first 5 books were written by Moses, and he explains how the story of the world became to be. So there was a Lord that was maker of all things, and he created the world, and he created everything that is in the world. He created the entire universe, how the world works, every single thing. He is a being that is bigger than us, that is greater than us, and he created Adam and Eve, and he lived in community with them. He created them in his image. He wanted them to follow him. They were a part of who he was. He breathed life into them. So with his breath, unlike the other things that he kind of just said and happened, he actually breathed life into humans. And so that's how we became. And so we were all together sort of, I don't want to say as one, because we were certainly underneath of him, but that's how he created us, was to be in community with him. And we were tempted. He said, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A serpent came in, tempted Eve, and Eve was like, ooh, you're right. This really does look delicious. And so she ate from that fruit. She gave that fruit to Adam. He ate from that fruit. They severed the relationship. They also got the full knowledge, by the way, which is something I've never mentioned before, of the garden of the full knowledge of good and evil. Now, we can argue what that looked like before, but the reality is now they have full knowledge. And that I genuinely believe has changed us. So now we have this fallen nature that understands and really incorporates in our life the idea of evil. Even to the point where, and this is going off on my history thing here, my student says, so I work with emotional support students, so they have some emotional issues, baggage, whatever it is that you want to call it. And he said, why are all the good things bad for you? Or why are all the good things illegal? And so in his mind, fun and joy only comes from doing things that are bad for you. So this is sort of like, he's a picture, in some ways, a more innocent picture of what we're all like, right? So the reality of all of our natures is in some way we enjoy the things that God says we should not be enjoying, the things that God says are not good for us. And so he has worked from that time in order to turn us back to him. And in this conclusion, he has sent his son, Jesus, who is the Son of God. He is fully human, and he also is fully God. But he sent him, what we're starting to see, he sent him and he's fully in communion with the Lord and with the Holy Spirit. And so together they are all working, which they are one entity, but in three parts, some mystery that we don't necessarily fully understand, that we could certainly have discussions about. But he has sent all of them in order to save the entire world from this sin that we sort of sit in and soak in and in a lot of ways prefer over the Lord. So we have seen Jesus heal a lot of people. We have seen Jesus do a lot of teachings. We have seen him do a lot of things. He is consistently letting people know that he is the Messiah. He is consistently letting people know he is the Son of God, and he is consistently letting people know he is God. So through every single thing that he does, he is telling all of those in and around him all of the pieces of who he is. And so we're going to move on today to this demon-possessed guy. So it says so he had just been teaching right by the lake of Galilee, right? So all the way up in Galilee. And so he's been teaching there. And so they go from one side over to the other side. And if you remember yesterday, as they were going over, there was some like crazy weather that happened and he told the weather to stop. Well, now they're landing over on the other side. And when they land over on the other side, I'm going to bring up this discrepancy immediately. There are two different places that each of the authors say that they land. So they could be landing in the Gadarenes or the Gerasenes. So it could be one of those two different places. Mark and Luke say it one way, and Matthew says it a slightly different way. Matthew's story has some slight variations in it. And so we've discussed the inerrancy of Scripture, right? Like there are some differences, and the differences could be purposeful, right? So the author may have said, I don't genuinely think that the author was like, oopsie, this story, it says that it's in the Gadarenes and that is, or the Gerasenes, and that's super duper far away. It's like, I don't know, I think something like 20 to 40 miles away from the lake. And so then the story of the pigs jumping off the cliffs would be really far-fetched because you can probably see where the pigs are. And so he changes the location. That could be. It could be that the Gerasenes was another name for, they say, I think it's Cushi, which was relatively close and probably could have taken up, probably could have been truthfully where the story was. We don't know. We haven't met the authors, so we're not completely sure. So what we do is we take it to the best of our ability, try and understand the point and purpose of what it has to say, and really just sit in that and think, to see what that means. Maybe one of them was saying maybe it has like an ancient Hebrew meaning, and maybe that's what they really meant. They didn't really mean the city. So any of those things are possibilities, leaving them kind of open in possibility space. Okay, so he goes across the lake to the region of, let's say, the Gerasenes. He gets out of the boat, and a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. And again, I'm going to say in Matthew's, it says, two of them come. And the two that come are super violent. This one, single, says he's violent, he's breaking through his chains, he's possessed by tons of demons. So again, the one that says two, is it negating, the one that says one, I should say, is it negating the fact that there could be two of them? Listen, that's kind of far-fetched, right? Maybe. Or maybe Matthew remembers it as two of them. Maybe Matthew was actually traveling with them and Mark and Luke were not traveling and they only got the story that it was one. Again, right? Maybes. These are just things to sit on, right? I don't know if these are like end all be alls, right? These are just kind of things to sit on and try and understand. So this is what we know about whether it's one or whether it's two. These are some of the things that we know about him. He was so strong. He was demon-possessed. This guy was demon-possessed. He was so strong in his demon possession that they couldn't even chain him. He was breaking through the chains, and now he was like ostracized, and he was off in a place by himself. Was this a choice that he made? Like, he was demon-possessed. Did he not want to live in and amongst other people? Was he so far gone in his demon possession that it was better to be alone? What, every time he went there, were they trying to chain him up? That we don't necessarily know for sure. But what we do know is he was off living on his own. And I feel like in some ways he was still there. So like the demon possession was there, but so was he. And this is why. So it says he lives in the tombs. No one could bind him anymore. He tore his chains apart night and day among the tombs and in the hills. He would cry out and cut himself with stones. There was misery there. He was not happy being the way he was, but obviously unable to heal himself. When he sees Jesus from a distance, he runs to Jesus and falls on his knees. And that's why I say, like, he's there. The demons are there and he's there. So, because he runs towards Jesus and then he falls on his knees. But then the demons say, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" He's run towards them. So, right, like they're calling out the demons. And then when he runs out to him, Jesus asks what his name is. He says it's Legion, and it's Legion because there's a legion of demons inside of him, right? There are many demons inside of him. He begs Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. So the demons are asking Jesus for some kind of sympathy. Like, you can take us out of this guy, but don't send us out. One of them says, don't send us into the abyss, like this place where there is maybe nothing but darkness. So they want to be in and amongst things. And they recognize that Jesus is the Son of God, by the way. So there's the other thing. Like, they are in full recognition of who he is. There's no even like mistaking it. Like, they don't say anything else like teacher or rabbi, or right. Like, they don't call him anything else. They were in full understanding of who he is. So it's interesting to me how the supernatural world has a better understanding of him than we do. And so then they say, send us among the pigs. And so he sent them out and in among the pigs. There were 2,000 of pigs that they sent them into. And I think, because we're like, why did they send them into pigs? Like, the pigs were considered a dirty animal to the Israelites. Like, they were an unclean animal that they wouldn't have eaten. And so it would make sense that a dirty spirit would have been sent into a dirty animal. And then they go and run off the cliff. Is this a better ending for the demons? I don't know. Like, is it disintegrate? Like, I'm not sure what happens with the demons, if Jesus did have compassion for the demons or if he did not. But what we do know is that the demons were then taken out of the person, which is the important thing, sent into the pigs. The pigs then jumped into the abyss. Or jumped into into Galilee. In verse 14, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed. So this man who had been in their town, they'd been binding him, he's crying out, he's cutting himself. Obviously, they don't want him in the town. And when they see him, then he's sitting and he's calm and he's clean. And they say, then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. They were afraid of what he had done, and they were asking him to leave their region. And I want to note this because I do really like human nature, which is something I've mentioned on these recordings a lot. Like, I really like to focus in on human nature. And my daughter is actually a psych major at school. And so she sends me this the other day. It's from a book called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. So I just want to make sure that I note this. And in this, she says, whenever a person in a family system starts to make changes, even if the changes are healthy and positive, it's not unusual for other members in this system to do everything they can to maintain the status quo and bring things back to homeostasis. So if you understand where I'm going with this, they had been used to him, even though they were probably scared of him, even though they probably assumed he was crazy or demon possessed. They were used to him being away and being what he was. And as soon as Jesus fixed him, they were afraid of Jesus. They should have, you would think, right? Like, if all being normal, if human nature being exactly what it's supposed to be, you think they would have said, this is the most glorious gift that you could have given to our town, is to heal this man and help him be a more productive member of our community, right? This is a gift that keeps giving. He's healed, he's healthy, he's well. And instead they were scared and they asked him to leave. So it's just a check on what our human nature does, and like just even thinking of ourselves and the way in which just this whole idea, right? Because this isn't even, the quote I gave you has nothing to do with the biblical perspective, right? But thinking of our biblical perspective, there's some truth in this. How do we respond when people change in our lives? do we respond along with them in a really good way? Or do we butt up against that nature because we're used to, even though we just said like we want something different, but we're used to what we're used to, and we are afraid of anything looking any different than it does, even if we claim that we don't like it, right? This is part of our nature that we need to look towards. These are some of the things that Jesus can heal us of, right? Because if we're always looking towards him, then we're joyful when somebody changes for the better, when a demon possession has been taken away from them. We want to celebrate with them for their joy. We don't want to be scared and send the healer away. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. So he was hoping to go with him, which would be very understandable, at least in my mind. It would be understandable. This guy healed him. Nobody else could heal him. He had been damaged for so long, and so he wanted to be with his healer. But instead, Jesus said, I need you to stay in this town, much like the woman at the well, although that's not what he says, but much like the woman at the well, I need you as a healed person. I need you to go out and to share with other people. And I even say that, saying that's a really hard position to be in. You looked like this, and now you want to look like this because you've been healed, but people still see this. And sometimes it's hard to be a voice that knows that they looked like this and to talk to people who knew that, right? This is in our human condition a really challenging thing to do. And he's asking him to be courageous, right, through the strength that the Lord gave him, and to go out and to talk to people who knew he was a broken man, who will be afraid of him, who won't necessarily celebrate in that joy. All right, I want to move on to this, to the next section where we see two different types of healings. So I'm going to go into the Mark version. Mark 5, it says, when Jesus again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake. So after he had healed this guy from demon possession, then he crosses over to the other side of the lake. As soon as he gets off the lake, he's just bombarded with people. This is, I feel like, the point in his ministry. He's been, I'm not going to guess how many, because he's around 3 years. It says he's there. So maybe he's been traveling up and down for a year, year and a half, 2 years maybe at this point. But he's teaching in towns. He's healing these wounded people. People are following him by the dozens, hundreds, and possibly thousands. And so as soon as he gets off, everybody wants to be there. And by the way, some of them just want the magic. They just want the healing. They're like, this guy is everything and anything. He's going to make me better. And so I just want to go up and meet him. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're all there following Jesus as the Messiah. They might just be trying to get a prize. I was going to say a trick, but I knew that wasn't right. A prize. So when he crossed over the side of the lake, the crowd is gathered around him. And then one of these synagogue leaders, so obviously somebody high in the Jewish community, his name was Jairus, and he saw Jesus and fell at his feet. So right away, we kind of recognize he's showing humility, right, to this guy. He's recognizing that Jesus is something bigger. He's not just a good teacher, but he's got something more. And he says, my daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so she will be healed and live. So Jesus wound up going with him. So remember, he's been crowded. He's got people all around him. These people come out and say, can you come to my house? And so on foot, he starts walking to this guy's house, and he's just surrounded by people. They all want to be near him. They all want whatever it is that he has. So they're all surrounding him, possibly trying to listen to him, possibly just wanting to be in his presence. And as he goes there, there's this woman who is following him as well. She's been bleeding. This is a really, really famous story. She's been bleeding for 12 years. She's gone to the doctors. She's tried to be healed. In all of these things, it just gets worse. And, not trying to go into too many details, this would be an awful way to live. Even if Israel didn't make her shout out that she was unclean, this is an awful way to live. Even worse, she's a woman that's bleeding. In the community in which she's living in, she should be separated from them. So when a woman is in this time, she's separated. So she's separated for a time, and usually they'd be separated with the other women who are kind of going through that same thing. They're all separated together, and then they clean, right? They do ritual cleaning, and then they come back and they're in, in the town that they're in, or back in the homes that they're in. So there's kind of like a special place for them to go to. 12 years. Even if she's in and among women who have their normal time that they need to be away, this is not a way in which to live your life. It would be lonely. It would be sad, not even accounting for the physical stuff that's happening to her, but emotionally, it would be really draining on her. And so just remembering that, so he comes out and she's just at this broken point, and she says to herself, if I could just touch his cloak. She doesn't even want to touch him. She doesn't want to burden him by asking, right? Like Jairus was the leader of a synagogue, walks right up, boom, boom, boom. The centurion we see sent some servants, boom, 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 walks right up to him, right? Because they were people with power. She's a nobody. She's an unclean woman. Like, even if I do touch him, that's not good for him, right? Because as an unclean woman, she couldn't touch him. So it wasn't good for him. So she's like, but if I just, like, just this little touch in his cloak, I know that he can heal me. This idea of the way that she looked at him, and can I note too, even in saying this in my head, I'd like to note that the two most humble people who have spoken to him have both been women. Now, to get real, in the community that they're in, they would be considered less than. So not bad, not awful, but they would have been considered less than. One was a woman that went out and did a lot of things. Another is a woman that's been bleeding. And so even in and amongst women, they are considered less than. But just that note of like their willingness to fall at his feet and to like, the one that, right, because I'm just thinking about the one that wiped his feet with her hair. The humility and the love that they have shown to him is overwhelming. As me and a woman who lives in this century, lives at this time, who's got lots of power, I have the ability to make any and all of my own decisions anytime I want to. I struggle a lot with this concept. If I am not alone, right? Like if you guys are listening, you're like, you know what? I really struggle with this concept too. Like I look at that and I kind of go like, oh, well, she should have, or what, any of those things. We need to recheck our hearts, because this is the posture we're all supposed to have. They look bad because society is sort of deeming them bad. But the reality is internally, we all look like that. Like, I am extremely unclean on the inside. And so my posture should always be this way towards the Lord. And this is not the first, second, last, or whatever. Like, we're going to see this over and over and over again. And the love that he shows to the humble and how he lifts them up in his kingdom, this is the nature that we want to have. And it can't be a fake one. It's got to come from inside. It's got to be real, that we say, when Jesus walks up to me, I'm going to be like, if I can only touch his cloak, that is more than enough for me. I don't need to say his name. I don't need to reach out to him. I don't need him to turn and say anything to me. But if I could only touch his cloak. So this is how she is internally, right? And let's see how he responds to her. Because she says this, and then she does. She goes out, she touches him, and as soon as she touches him, boom, she's healed. And he says, at once, Jesus realizes that the power has gone out from him. I love this also, because there is some interconnectedness between himself, the Holy Spirit, and the Lord, right? So like all three of them are completely interconnected, where he can feel the power going out of him. I don't think that that's true. So for those who have any kind of healing ability at this point, or any kind of prophetic gift, or I don't, that dog barks, I'm hoping you guys aren't hearing it too loud. But I don't think that we can, I don't think we can ever feel the power going out of us. He could. So there was something inside him that he had the ability to know when his power was being used. So he looks around and he says, who touched me? And his disciples were like, Jesus, there's people everywhere. Like, who knows? Like, just, it could have been anyone. But he stops. There's a crowd milling all over the place. They're all like, imagine like a parade, right? Like they're in motion in going into this one place because they're fun. And he stops dead in silence. And he just looks around until, and this is what I love, because there's a difference in these two stories. He waits. And I'm sure she's sensing he's going to wait until. So he gives her, this woman who feels so dirty that just wanted to touch the hem of his cloak. He gives her, this is my view on it, right? This is the way I see it. He gives her the ability, the courage and the strength. He stays quiet long enough for her to stand up and say, it was me. She knew he was waiting. And so she stands up and she says, then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth. And he then responded to her and he called her daughter. So he showed this loving relationship to her, to an unclean woman. Your faith has healed you. So because of the way that she saw him and because of what she knew about him, that's why she's healed. He said, then go in peace and now be freed from your suffering. So he's given her even more on top of that. Now she has peace. She doesn't just have the healing of her body, and now her suffering will be there no more, because he has healed not just her body, but everything about her. Now, after that, we're going to go back to this Jairus story. So now Jesus is he was like speaking to the woman, and then Jairus' daughter died. And so the people come out and they're like, hey, you guys can stop doing what you're doing. His daughter actually died. And so then Jesus overhears and he says to Jairus, so this is the difference between the woman and Jairus. She was like, I believe, I touch, I know that I'm going to be healed by you. To Jairus, he said, don't even listen to what they're saying. I need you to believe. So he's reaching out, in my mind, he's reaching out to Jairus and he's calling up his faith. Right? So he's encouraging him to kind of remember his faith. Remember, you came here and asked me for this. Don't be discouraged, because going back to that seeds, right? Because the world has came up and maybe started choking. Do not lose faith because of that. These things are going to happen. I need you to still believe. And so then he goes to his house and he says, he didn't let anyone with him except James, his brother John, and so like the two brothers, the son of Zebedee, and Peter. So those three went with him, and obviously the family, and they go inside the door. Everybody else he made wait outside. When he's in there, there's the wailing women, right? They're in there crying, and that's what they did, right? Like they had these like paid mourners. Everybody's mourning, wailing, and crying. And he says, the child is not dead, but asleep. And they all laugh and they say, how ridiculous. This is an image. Here we go again with a sign. This is an image of what the Lord has said about us from the very beginning. Some of you will live and some of you will die. Your body is going to die, but you're going to be asleep. My vision of this. So he's confirming with them, she's not dead. She's asleep. She hasn't died. And so we want to make sure that and so they never even register it. And I don't even necessarily think it was for them, but this is for us. And I'm going to say that Jairus probably should have had some kind of understanding of what he was saying. And then he says, after he put everybody out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him. He takes her by the hand and he tells her to get up. And again, like this full miraculous thing that he always does, she gets up. She doesn't, like, those images where you think and they lay in bed and then they just kind of blink their eyes and maybe cough a couple of times and roll over. Like, she doesn't do that. She gets fully up and out of bed. So it was a full miracle. And then he gave strict orders not to let anyone know. So once again, he's saying, don't tell anyone. This is the second person he's brought back to life. And he says, don't tell anybody about it. And then he tells her to give them something to eat. And again, we're not too sure why he doesn't want anyone to know, but he's very strict. And I think he's being honest. He says, don't tell anyone. Maybe he doesn't want people to know that he's resurrecting. He's bringing people back to life, because that's not something he's going to do with everybody. And this is how we end today. This is the finish of our reading today. So I hope you have stuck with me. I hope you have gotten some things out of that story that maybe I don't know, or maybe it just helped reiterate some things that you guys were really comfortable with. So I want you to like, share, and subscribe if this has been a blessing to you. Comment if you're brand new. I want to hear you. I want to hear a shout out. And I will see you next time. But of course, in the meantime, keep reading.